Welcome. I'm Julia Cohen, Managing Director and co-founder of Plastic Pollution Coalition. Thank you for joining this month's webinar, part of our global series to bring our community together to highlight the latest issues, information, and resources to help stop the global plastic pollution crisis. Our August webinar, Will Mushrooms and Seaweed Help Replace Single-Use Plastic?, is focused on solutions using alternative regenerative materials. A little bit about us. Plastic Pollution Coalition is a nonprofit communications and advocacy organization that collaborates with an expansive global alliance of organizations, businesses, and individuals to create a more just, equitable, and regenerative world free of plastic pollution and its toxic impacts. And finally, feel free to tag the panelists on their social handles that are listed here and tag us at Plastic Pollutes. So moving along, we have 4 poll questions for you. The first one kind of ties into what everyone's been putting in the chat, but just by region of the world, where are you joining us from today? And this is super helpful for our panelists to know where folks are joining from. Obviously, North America leading in 80% so far. Significant portion of people from Europe and North Asia. So thank you all. So what best describes the sector in which you work? Okay, looks like, well, about 24% nonprofits, 24% identifying as other, but over 20% are from businesses, 15% from education, academia, almost 10% from government. Super interesting. Thank you. Third poll question, do you have access to plastic alternatives made from regenerative materials? And if so, which materials are used? And on this one, you can select all that apply. I'm super curious, we'll get into this later, but we are definitely looking at planning another webinar with some folks from some of the hemp businesses that are part of our coalition as well. Glad to hear that folks have access to some materials. And last but not least, in your opinion, what is the biggest barrier to replacing plastic items with regenerative alternatives? It's also a multiple choice. Super interesting. All of these are kind of around the same, but it looks like lack of infrastructure to scale is pulling ahead into the lead. So yes, laws and policies and costs are concerned, but is the infrastructure the biggest barrier? I look forward to getting into this now in the discussion. So without further ado, thank you all for participating in the polls. Super interesting. I think our speakers will address some of this in each of their presentations, and then we can get more into it as we get into the discussion and the Q&A. So thank you all so much for participating. Today, we are excited to have 3 amazing speakers from some of our business members. And we have Julia Marsh, who's co-founder and CEO of Sway, Meghan Olson, who's the director of mushroom packaging for Ecovative, and Dr. Victoria Piunova, Chief Technology Officer for Loliware. Thank you guys so much for being here. And it's my pleasure now to introduce the first of today's panelists, Dr. Piunova from Loliware. Dr. Piunova leads all technological and product platform development from MVP launch to commercialized product at Loliware. She brings over 10 years of experience in sustainable materials development for applications in biotechnology and sensing. She has invented 25 issued US patents and authored more than 30 publications in peer-reviewed journals. She's also a recipient of the American Chemical Society's Young Investigator Award. Welcome, Victoria.
Thank you. Thank you for the kind intro.
Next, I'd like to introduce Julia Marsh. Julia is the co-founder and CEO of Sway, a venture-backed materials company producing compostable packaging made from seaweed. Julia is a designer with over a decade spent building brand and packaging systems for consumer goods companies, technology startups, and design studios. She founded Sway in 2020, led by the belief that designers must take part in solving the planet's greatest challenges. Welcome, Julia.
Thanks for having me.
And last but not certainly not least, it's my great pleasure to introduce Meghan Olson. Meghan is the director of Ecovative's mushroom packaging business. Meghan leads Ecovative's mushroom packaging team and is responsible for commercial activities in North America and supporting the growing global network of myco-composite licenses with direct oversight over both sales and licensing funnels. Welcome, Meghan.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me.
We are so glad to have all of you here. Super excited to jump in and go from here. It looks like we've got a list of amazing questions already submitted to kind of kick us off. And I know there were some slides and some props and things folks were going to use. So feel free to take a little time to do that. And we'll get started with Dr. Piunova about Loliware first, please. Okay, and the question for you is, what is the potential for scaling up and having products made from seaweed or mushrooms go mainstream?
Oh, that's a loaded question. Well, we're certainly very optimistic. And in years of work that we've done so far, definitely demonstrated that it's not a dream and it's very much a reality. And scale up is possible on pretty much every single aspect, contributing aspect, from supply chain to production to the distribution. And there's certainly a great appetite and desire to employ alternative materials in our everyday consumable plastic.
Wonderful. And sorry, I kind of jumped the gun. Maybe if you could just do a little bit of an overview of Loliware.
Loliware is a materials technology company focusing on using seaweed and seaweed-derived biopolymers to replace single-use plastic. The vision is that using seaweed-derived materials, and I have to emphasize that seaweed is quite unique in the regards that very similarly to terrestrial plants, it absorbs carbon dioxide and therefore mitigates climate change and also mitigates ocean acidification. But also, unlike terrestrial plants, seaweed grows unattended or primarily unattended, does not require valuable agricultural resources. Most importantly, it does not require fresh water, and it grows very fast. So there are multiple cycles in the growing season. And we see this as a very valuable and overlooked stock for possible replacement and very promising replacement of single-use plastic.
Wonderful. And I know you guys have been a long time coalition member of Plastic Pollution Coalition since the beginning. It's really great to finally have you here on this webinar. Thank you so much. And I think we usually have folks who have slides do a little presentation first, and I don't know what happened to my notes, but I welcome Julia of Sway next to give your presentation, please.
Happily. So again, I'm Julia. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Sway, and we are specifically focused, if you go to the next slide, on the 5 trillion pieces of thin film packaging that are made and produced every year. So that's bags and wrappers and pouches. 5 trillion pieces are used, but basically none of them are recycled. Recyclers actually bale these materials and send them to landfill. In landfill, they oftentimes blow out into natural spaces. And this is a great opportunity for compostable materials and specifically seaweed materials to come into play. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that my company Sway is focused on replacing poly bags to start, and then other very annoying thin film plastics. I have some here. You probably don't even think about them, but like every day you use thin film plastics every time you go shopping. Maybe not this particular audience, but a lot of people are still reliant on plastic bags. And then every item of clothing that you're wearing right now, every item of clothing in your closet, unless it was thrifted, was at some point in a plastic bag, whether you saw it or not. And these are the types of bags we want to get rid of. There are 180 billion of them produced and used in the fashion industry every year. The vast majority of them are going to landfill. And so we want to do something about that. We're using the natural polymers abundantly found in different types of seaweed to replace thin film packaging. We use seaweed to create home compostable packaging that actually can decompose into soil within 4 to 6 weeks. You don't need a special facility. You can just mix it in with your food scraps and it's going to disappear into healthy soil. The great thing about our technology is that it's designed to be compatible with traditional plastic manufacturing equipment. So it is easier for us to scale. And we're really just trying to target applications where a reusable or package-free solution isn't available. So just the most annoying plastics. If you go to the next slide, I just love to show that there's a whole spectrum of opportunity with new materials where you can show different colors and textures to catch people's attention and make them think about the plastic that they interact with on a day-to-day basis and tell them a story about the ocean and about seaweed. If you go to the next slide, Victoria already touched on a bunch of the reasons why we love seaweed so much. We work with ocean farms all around the world, but primarily in North and South America. One of the reasons that we love them, besides their services as ecosystem architects, is that they don't need fresh water, and they don't need land, and they grow abundantly on every coastline in the world, amounting to 7 million square kilometers of seaweed. So this stuff is everywhere. And finally, the last slide, we have a really diverse interdisciplinary team. We've actually grown since this photo was taken. We're based in the Bay Area in California. We're gearing up for pilots this fall with major fashion brands. And so there's a lot of good news on its way. I hope you'll stay tuned and excited to answer your questions in this panel. Thanks for having me.
We're so happy to have you with us. Thank you so much. Super excited about your relatively new company starting in the beginning of pandemic too. I know we need more like all of you. So, and then let's give Meghan a chance to do a little introduction and then we'll hop into the questions.
Sure. Hello. So I'm with Ecovative Design and on the mushroom packaging team at Ecovative. Ecovative was founded in 2007 with our composite technology. So I have some samples next to me here. It's a composite technology because actually we touch on two of the questions two of the answers from one of the poll questions. We have hemp and mycelium, so mushroom, in our packaging solution. So this was the technology that Ecovative was originally founded around by our co-founders, Eben and Gavin, back in 2007, actually while they were students at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Since that time, Ecovative has grown tremendously and we've really transitioned to being a mycelium technology company. So we've learned so much about mycelium and how it functions and how it grows, and we've identified different applications for mycelium, which is the root structure of mushrooms. And my team, we're focused on scaling our mushroom packaging solution, which is really the most mature technology platform that Ecovative has. So right now we're building out a new facility in Green Island, New York, focused heavily on scaling our packaging throughout North America. We've got a really strong licensee in Europe called the Magical Mushroom Company. And we're growing quite rapidly to be able to support a growing number of clients around the world, and especially heavily focused in North America currently. There's a lot of different applications that we have for our composite material, but ultimately we're focused the most on packaging right now as the solution that we're scaling.
Super exciting. And I know you guys were one of the very first companies in this whole space, and really inspired us in the beginning of Plastic Pollution Coalition as well. And I know there's lots of other students still in school right now working on equally innovative regenerative projects. So to kick off our conversation, there are a lot of great questions coming in the chat. And I might jump in just with some that are the quickest or easiest, and maybe Meghan, this might be for you, but are these still edible after being made out of mushrooms? I'm sure you get that one a lot.
Yeah, we get that one a lot. So technically, yes, it's not very tasty because of the hemp. So we use hemp hurd, which is the waste from the industrial fiber hemp plant. It's kind of like asking me if you could eat a wood chip, right? Is your wood chip organic and can you eat it? Yeah, sure, but it's not going to be super tasty. But it's not a harmful strain of mushroom. So I guess go ahead and try it. I'm not going to do it on camera today, but I wouldn't be afraid of it. So what I will say though is Ecovative does create edible mushroom edible products out of mycelium. We have a spin out company, My Forest Foods, and that company uses our mycelium platform that is 100% mycelium. So instead of being a composite material, like with the root structure of mushroom plus the hemp, is just the mycelium that we grow in these really large beds of material. And we're currently turning that into a bacon product. So it's an alternative protein product. So absolutely, that strain of mycelium that we're using is not only edible, but a gourmet strain of mushroom. Whereas for our mushroom packaging solution, we use a tough and tenacious solution that will really work to hold those hemp fibers together as a composite solution.
Wow, that is awesome. There are a lot of related questions to that, but I want to give Julia first and then Victoria an opportunity to answer that about eating seaweed products.
I'll quickly answer with the same answer Megan gave. I wouldn't be afraid to eat it, but it's not recommended. We're currently focused on applications that don't come into contact with food, so I don't know it would be intuitive for someone to do so, but when we do expand to food packaging, like something like you see here, you could potentially consume it. It's all bio-based, plant-derived material.
And Victoria, I don't know if you can want to add to that, but one of the follow-on questions is asking about the terminology and the concepts of regenerative versus biodegradable or bio-originated. So maybe if you could speak to that, please.
Well, I will add to the first question. So we did do a food migration studies and compatibility for the food packaging, and checked every single box for FDA requirements. So it's perfectly safe and absolutely benign to eat, or at least the formulations that we're developing, and they do come in contact with food. So it's all food grade material. I wouldn't say that they're particularly tasty. However, my dog thinks otherwise. He really likes he really likes the items made of seaweed. So there's got to be something about the texture or smell. But yes, perfectly safe to eat, not very tasty, but definitely if it floats your boat, go for it. So in terms of remind me again, by regenerative and bio.
Regenerative versus biodegradable and bio-originated.
Yeah, so a bit of a, I guess, scientific or chemical terminology. So something might be biodegradable, which is not necessarily bio-derived. So a lot of synthetic materials have ability to be degraded, let's say, inside of our body. And that's how a lot of implants, for example, work. They might be materials might be man-made, but they can be degraded by natural enzymes. So, and by regenerative or bio-derived is something that actually came from the nature, so created by another organism or life organism, and that's the main differentiator.
Awesome, thank you. And you just reminded me, actually, I think I've eaten a Loliware item way back in the beginning. And yes, it was interesting. Awesome. All right. Well, moving along, one of the next questions also kind of builds off of this. Do we have enough raw material to replace the huge quantity of plastic? And maybe we'll just circle back and start with you, Megan.
Sure. So I think one of the things that I'll address with that question is related to the fact that I talked about mycelium, but we call ourselves mushroom packaging, right? So one of the key things to understand with our process is that we're not actually growing mushrooms. We never grow the fruiting body of a mushroom. We're not growing mushrooms and harvesting them and grinding them up to create our finished product. The mushroom that you think of when you go to a grocery store is the fruiting body of the mushroom, but we work with the root structure. So it's similar to thinking of an apple on an apple tree versus the roots. The mushroom that you buy in a grocery store is equivalent to the apple, whereas mycelium is equivalent to the roots of the tree. So we are continuing to propagate that mycelium and have an abundance of material available because of the way that we propagate it and store it. For hemp, the agricultural waste feedstock that we use in our process, we've tested over 700 different inputs for our process and can change what that input is depending on the application. For packaging, we've really optimized around that hemp hurd because of the way we're able to lightweight the packaging, because of the particle size, delivering an appropriate density for being a packaging solution. So hemp hurd is really that key question related to the availability of raw materials for our process. Ultimately, it is the waste of the industrial fiber hemp plant, like I mentioned. So we're not working with actually hemp from the CBD industry, for example, because the structure of the hemp plant is actually quite different. The industrial fiber hemp has more of that hemp hurd that we use available as the waste product. So ultimately, we look to source the hemp hurd as waste from farmers and be able to deliver value to them in an area that traditionally wouldn't be. But we also have additional options for what that raw material input is, like I mentioned. So we have optionality for when we continue to scale, making sure that we're sourcing as locally as possible, that we're working with a variety of different inputs to be able to create our finished product. Ultimately, the one key thing that we have to consider as we use different inputs is that particle size, like I mentioned. But ultimately, it's really a opportunity to use a variety of different raw material inputs in our process based on the application, which is a really great way to allow us to scale for both packaging and different applications for our materials. I have some acoustic tiles next to me here, for example. So lots of different form factors that we can create.
Terrific and exciting. All right, well, a few other questions that or I don't know if Julia or Victoria, you wanted to also weigh in on that one, sorry.
I would love to chat about the seaweed side of that coin. So as I mentioned very quickly when I was walking through those slides, there's 7 million square kilometers of seaweed growing along the coasts of our Earth's coastlines, which is roughly equivalent to the size of the Amazon rainforest. If you can imagine an underwater forest growing right now. We try to prioritize cultivated seaweed, so ocean farmed seaweed, because it's our goal to always be contributing to the ocean, not taking away. And that was kind of related to some other questions we're getting around sourcing. We work with a variety of different types of seaweed. There are 12,000 plus species to choose from. We have kind of our 3 heroes, and then we diversify constantly. And then as of 2019, there are nearly 40 million metric tons of seaweed being farmed each year. We just need a tiny fraction of that. So in terms of the availability of feedstock to replace plastics, it's certainly not going to replace all plastics. We don't want to do that, but we do want to support ocean ecosystems so we can have healthier oceans and then also displace as much plastic as we can.
Thank you, Victoria.
Well said, Julia. Yeah, I would definitely support the statement, and absolutely working with seaweed growers and the tradition of cultivating seaweed is pretty old, and of course, seaweed found its broad application in food and also in biotechnology, and its use as a plastic replacement is novel. And there is certainly concern: is there enough? Is it possible to grow enough? And the answer is yes. Again, through our work, and I'm sure Julia will support the statement as well, that growers could definitely supply and satisfy the demand. It's just a matter of having the demand. And we're trying to work very closely with growers, and most of the time with female growers, indigenous growers, communities which are underprivileged. And by doing that, so first of all, we making sure that we're restoring our coastal lines, but also supporting the communities which definitely need support.
Thank you. Well, so building off of that, I know there was a question about like how durable the products are and the potential for scaling. And so if you could each maybe take a minute or two to respond to that one. Going back to Meghan.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So when we look at a piece of mushroom packaging, we really think about it as a replacement for styrofoam. We're able to support products from a small tincture bottle that would fit in this all the way to heavy 1,000-pound industrial servers. Ultimately, when we're looking at an application for, like, for example, a beauty product, the durability of the material is important, but less important than for those heavy industrial products, right? So these are opportunities for us to really think about the presentation to a client and the form factor. Mushroom packaging is fully shelf stable for up to 30 years. So we haven't been around for 30 years, but we've done accelerated aging testing. So another thing to speak to that durability question is we talk about how we're home compostable, and we of course are, but a piece of mushroom packaging sitting on your desk is not going to start composting. It needs to be exposed to soil microbes to start breaking it down. So that's really the key piece there. We get clients asking us, well, your material is compostable, will it start to break down and transit to a client? No, absolutely not. So we design for performance. It's a performance protective packaging solution. We've got a lot of clients converting to us from molded paper pulps where there's not enough durability of that material. There's not the robust back side of the material. Oftentimes, you know, it's a hollow design for a molded pulp, for example. So we design, of course, for durability and protection of a product, but ultimately our material, again, is fully shelf stable for up to 30 years. We do standard drop testing and chip testing with clients before we put our product, into the client's hands and into fulfillment, for example. So.
Yeah, the challenge of designing for existing infrastructure is that the material has to perform so well, but you also want all these great attributes. So similar to Meghan, although quite different, we're having to tow different challenges in terms of fitting into complex distribution centers where packages are being thrown all around and thrown down chutes. And what we love about Seaweed and the compositions we've designed is that they're very strong. So this is Seaweed film I'm holding. It's really strong. It can stand up to tears. It's not going to break or damage whatever it's packaging. And it's also possible for us to make completely, you can't see it, transparent film. So this is Seaweed that I'm holding. You can tell what the package is inside of it. We have to balance those performance attributes with also the need to compost. So I think that's the challenge that a lot of young or incoming materials face, is how do you keep all the positive environmental attributes? It's going to compost in, with exposure to water and heat and air, but it's also going to protect in our case, a garment. So we're trying to toe that line perfectly.
Thank you, Victoria. I know you guys have some pellets that can go in existing machines, right? Super exciting new innovation.
Yes. Yeah, we'll definitely agree with both panelists. There's a balance, and for us, the guiding principle was to, we're on a mission to replace single-use plastic cutlery. So I have a straw as a first commercial product, which now could be found in multiple restaurants on the East and the West Coast. So the guiding principle for us is taking the enemy, what we're trying to replace, and trying to hit every single matrix, every single characteristic, mechanical properties, physical properties, water resiliency or water uptake, if you will. And so as tensile strength goes, the compressive strength goes. So for example, for a straw, which is, again, a scaled commercial product right now, it is 95% of polypropylene in performance metrics in terms of compressive strength, tensile strength, stability, and of course, we've got to be mindful of the fact that seaweed is a hydrophilic material, so it really likes water. So for us, it was quite a bit of a battle to almost change or alter the nature in a way that it's not as water-loving, but at the same time, without compromising degradation profiles. And so we've done our studies with certified agencies and also with home composters, and showed that it degrades exact same way as your regular paper straw would, even though it doesn't, however, it doesn't turn into mush in your drink. So it performs quite well. And so again, we understand the challenges, and there's quite a bit of pressure. And for us, the goal is to replicate as closely as possible the characteristics of the materials that we're trying to replace, from just the characteristics and performance parameters, but also the processing. As Julia mentioned, it's quite important to being able to use existing infrastructure. Just think about all the innovation and all the work and amount of effort that went into developing plastic infrastructure, which took like 100 years at this point. To force something new for chemical industry or plastic industry would be pretty challenging. So our guide was to use what's already there and be very creative with material science. So use the machinery and same processes, but change the nature of the material itself, make it degradable, and make it bioregenerative, biorenewable. So that's where we're at right now, and quite exciting development, and very looking forward to see what's coming next.
Thank you. Well, so next question, also a continuation. I feel like I could talk to each of you for hours or days here, but the material products and what you've created, how do they actually break down? When do they break down? How long does it take? And then off of that, kind of the recycling issue and how it impacts other recycling. Meghan, we'll start with you.
Sure, I'll start. So mushroom packaging is fully home compostable, which is important because it does not require industrial composting. Of course, it can go through industrial composting, collection composting bins, but it does not require high temperatures to break it down. So when we take a piece of mushroom packaging, we recommend breaking it up into small pieces. I think I got some in my eye when I did that. Break it up into small pieces and put it in your soil. It's similar to a wood chip in your soil versus a log, right? They're both going to break down over time, but those wood chips will return to the earth more quickly. So when we break up a piece of mushroom packaging, fully returns to the earth in 45 days. It's also completely ocean safe, compostable in 180 days. So if it ends up in waterways, it's completely safe. Not only that, but it's a soil amendment. So the mycelium in our material actually adds nutrients to the soil. This product is only made from mycelium and that hemp hurd that I mentioned, that agricultural waste product. We do give the mycelium a little bit of food in the process of growing the material because it truly does grow. We start with this is just an example of our grow it yourself kits, where the material is dehydrated and you don't see any of the evidence of that mycelium in the product. And it just looks like a pile of wood chips, but that's the hemp, for example. So the mycelium then grows throughout the time frame that we're growing apart in a mold, and then is able to fully break down, like I mentioned, in 45 days when it's placed into the soil.
So exciting. Julia?
Again, similar. We're on the right panel in the right place. Our material is designed, to decompose entirely within 4 to 6 weeks in a home compost environment. So that means, you're getting air, water, and time. It doesn't, if you're not in a rush for finished compost, you can just allow the materials to decompose naturally. What I love about compost as compared with recycling is you can see it happen in front of you. So if you're concerned about greenwashing, or you're concerned about where your materials go after you use them, in compost, you can literally watch them disappear. Usually it's going to take under 6 weeks for soy materials. You can also send them to an industrial composter, or compost them in industrial compost if your local composting accepts packaging material. And similarly, we've tested the nutrient content to see if the seaweed carries added value to the compost. And while there are trace amounts of NPK content, we do believe there's an opportunity to actually create healthier soil at the end of life. Not at the same scale with Ecovative's mycelium, but similar.
Great, thank you. Victoria?
Yeah, same here. 51 days to be precise in home compost. So we try to measure everything and quantify all the processes. So absolutely have to. So in addition to, there's a big concern of what is going to happen if it escapes. So let's say it doesn't get into the home composting bin, but it goes somewhere outside and then eventually ends up in the ocean. And it was important for us to show what happens in the ocean and specifically in ocean sediment. So we performed tests with OWS, which is a well-established certifying agency. And so our material degrades very quickly in a matter of a month. I don't remember the exact number of days, but it was very short in marine sediment. And it really is not surprising because it came from the ocean, it came from the water. And there are truly microorganisms in this environment and marine sediment, which are capable of degrading our material or seaweed-derived materials very well. So absolutely no concern about so-called escape plastic, which is definitely a huge issue for PLA and PHA, and definitely for all the petroleum-derived materials. Home composting is certainly an option, but if somebody's not particularly diligent, it's going to degrade relatively fast, and if anything, will only enrich the soil or just goes back to where it came from.
Great. So following on that, I guess there's a lot of questions about is there potential for replacing harder non-single-use plastics? And then, as part of the kind of connection on that, if you're not home composting, are you throwing these things just in the regular trash? Megan.
Okay, I figure we're going in the same order at this point. For the home composting piece of the question, it's okay for a piece of mushroom packaging to end up in the trash, right? But it'll end up in a landfill and go through anaerobic degradation, right? So the off gases are different than if you have it in your soil where it's really becoming a soil amendment. One of the things that I did want to add and kind of clarify when I was talking about home composting for us, yeah, sure, a compost bin is great, but it could also mean breaking up a piece of mushroom packaging and putting it right in the topsoil in your garden or around a tree in Central Park in New York City. That is a completely fine place for a piece of mushroom packaging to end up. If it ends up in a recycle bin, it will likely not really have a way of recycling the material. We don't talk about recycling for mushroom packaging right now because ultimately we know a lot of the recycling infrastructure product goes to the landfill as its final end of life scenario. So we really focus on educating our customers around the home composting. And for us, that means, again, literally you could put it in your topsoil, even if you're not someone who actively composts your material, or put it by your front door and watch it slowly break down over time because you leave the big piece of material there. Related to the question around harder plastics and durability, we do have some clients who are using mushroom packaging in reuse scenarios, shipping back in different systems that require the packaging to be reused. I will say that we focus heavily on that single use scenario because of the compostability of our material. A piece of mushroom packaging is soft, has a velvety like texture from the mycelium, but ultimately because of the hemp particles that will scuff over time and over reuse. So we do tend to focus more heavily on replacing those single-use plastics, but we do again have some clients who are working with our material for return type of scenarios, and the packaging holds up just fine through those scenarios as well.
That's great to hear. Julia.
We're focused solely on thin film applications, so I think this actually would be a better question for Victoria.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the beauty of the material, or the beauty of seaweed-derived materials, is that they do degrade, but also dependent on the composition of the resin, and we specifically focus on the resins and pelletized resins, we can fine-tune the duration of the life cycle or lifetime. And so currently we actively working on injection molding. And of course, there's a requirement for some of these items to last longer than 6 months or a year. And this certainly could be accomplished through modification of the resin, not necessarily chemical modification, but physical modification and of the composition modification. And that's where we're at. So it will eventually degrade over time. However, to trigger degradation, specific conditions are needed. So let's say a higher moisture and appropriate makeup of microorganisms. With that being said, we can modulate the mechanical properties of the material or the final part by changing the composition of the resin.
Thank you. We have still 77 questions in the Q&A, and we had like the top 15 from the hundreds that were submitted when people signed up, and only a few more minutes to really discuss this. So I want to just put a couple out there and then give each of you an opportunity to respond to which ones you want to, and we can go in reverse order. But so one is, what are the main blocks to adoption of these wonderful ideas around the world, and when will we see them become more widely available? Another is, how do the costs of your products compare, in particular for Sway with traditional plastic bags? And then, can individuals invest in any of your companies, and how to do that? So we'll go with Victoria first.
Absolutely, individual investors are welcome. We would love to see you participate and participate for a good cause. So in terms of the price per pound, we actually done comparative analysis with PLA, PHA, paper pulp, and so PLA runs anywhere between $2 to $5 a kilo. Our material goes from $4 to $5 a kilo. Well, divide by 2, that would be per pound. And very much comparable price range for all the bio-derived plastics. So as any barriers, I don't see any obvious barriers like technological barriers, for example, because we do use existing infrastructure. We try to replicate conventional plastic production process to the T. So we use standard compounding equipment, we use standard pallets, it's exact same distribution, same packaging material. There's really nothing out of ordinary, essentially same temperatures, same equipment. I think the only difference is, like anything new, there's always a skepticism involved, but we have partners, manufacturing partners, which are 100-year-old plastic manufacturing companies. And, there's a bit of a skepticism, but after a couple of runs, they were absolutely blown away that I've never seen anything like that actually works so well and works exact same way as plastic, but not being a plastic. So I think it's just a matter of time, and kind of changing the perspective, like truly believing that this is not some kind of a one-off and on novelty, but actually a sustainable solution and long-term solution to the plastic problem.
Thank you, Julia.
Yeah, I can build on that. I think one of the biggest challenges is consumer education. I think there's definitely an appetite with a lot of these larger corporations. One of the questions that I saw listed somewhere is, are the major polluters looking for solutions? And generally, yes, they are, but they want them to cost nothing more, and they don't want to have to do any education for the consumer to understand why this slightly more expensive choice is superior. And so I think what we have to do is really be thoughtful around labeling and how these materials are marketed so that you can distinguish them from the partial fixes that exist today. A lot of the incumbent alternatives to plastics are derived from other bio-based solutions, but they have sneaky petroleum-based binding agents integrated, or they're not actually compostable, or they're not actually marine degradable, or they contaminate recycling streams, et cetera, et cetera. All these concerns that we have in our minds. So I think the big challenge is helping address that very warranted skepticism and saying, no, this is something different. It's completely new, and we want you to try it out, and then we're going to really scale it. And hopefully we can make regenerative materials the norm and the expectation that everyone else kind of gets on board with. So that's kind of my 2 cents there.
Yeah, those are both excellent answers. Where we're at with Ecovative right now, we've been around as a company for quite a while. When we started with our mushroom packaging material, we were sort of ahead of the curve before consumers were asking for sustainable packaging materials, which of course required companies to respond to that. Right now, I think all of us are seeing that consumers are asking for more sustainable materials. So organizations are also starting to set plans for, by X year, we need to replace all of the foams in our packaging. And we are really excited about playing a part in that packaging solution. Ultimately, we also look for hybrid opportunities to work with other packaging solutions to really deliver the best opportunity for a client, which is sometimes not a 100% mushroom packaging solution, but we are a component where we're protecting a really expensive item within that box. So that's one of the things that I'm really looking at as we scale and find the right clients to onboard. I'm finding the best fit opportunities for mushroom packaging to fit within their packaging solution. And it doesn't always have to be, again, 100% mushroom packaging. Right now, as we're scaling our business, we're building on all of the learnings that we've had over the last 15 years around mycelium and around mushroom packaging technology and production. We had a 3 to 5 year period where we're really heavily focused on licensing with our mushroom packaging platform. As we were scaling Ecovative's other mycelium technologies, we are still focused on licensing. As I mentioned, we have a number of great licensees, especially in Europe, both the Magical Mushroom Company and Grown Bio, delivering mushroom packaging solutions. But as we've seen a tremendous rise in e-commerce and demand for sustainable packaging solutions from clients, we've decided to reinvest in growing mushroom packaging ourselves, because we have the ability to learn or to build on all of our years of learning, both failures and triumphs through scaling mushroom packaging. There is one phase of our growth where we were focused extremely heavily on automation as much as possible in our production process. But what we learned is that we ultimately have a biological product, and we just shifted the labor to cleaning. And it was challenging to have folks who wanted to just clean our equipment. So we are actually in a phase right now where we're learning tremendously from that and simplifying our process. Ultimately, our production facilities are very modular, and the CapEx requirements are quite low for us to be able to scale. So we're building out our facility in Green Island, New York, and this will really be the state-of-the-art facility built on all of our 15 years of experience. And we look to expand quite rapidly from here, especially with more heavy presence in North America.
Awesome. We're really winding down now with just, kind of a minute or so for kind of final words. There have been questions about how can you replace, gloves for hospitals. What else? A lot of questions about mixed recycling, or how can you tell that your products are what materials that are, compostable, those kinds of things. So if we could just give each of you an opportunity to say some final remarks, and if you touch on those things, great. We will be sharing a recording of this webinar, and I can't believe it's gone by so fast. And we will share all the questions with the panelists, and if they can point us to some additional resources and links and things to share, that will also be included with the recording. So thank you all for submitting such amazing questions, and we'll start with Victoria.
Well, I think we touched upon quite a few points. So, we have really high hopes, and most important, well, not hope is not the right word. We're determined, and we're assured that it is a solution, and we're working very hard to make it a reality, not just, novelty product, but something that could be scaled and deployed and used as an alternative material, at least for single-use plastic and even beyond that.
Thank you. Julia.
I think this webinar really demonstrates how much community feedback, like what role community feedback has to play in the way that we design new materials. I think we're at this really great moment in time where there's a lot of consumer awareness around the materials we interact with on a daily basis, and there's an appetite from big brands to answer that need. And so we can be creative in the way that we design new materials. I think compostability is an inevitability. Recycling's only been around really since the 70s. we can compost materials and we can create healthy soil. We can't just keep amassing material that doesn't go anywhere. We need to return to like biological systems of circularity. And so that's the role that these types of materials can play. And the more we talk about them and get your feedback and your concerns, the better we can design these materials to actually address real needs. I think it's counterintuitive potentially, but as the founder of a materials company, but I would always advocate the package-free solutions the best. How about no materials? How about less consumption? But if you do need to use materials, seek natural ones and seek ones that are inspired by nature. So just really appreciate the feedback. Feel free to contact us at team@swaythefuture.com, and yeah, keep the questions and inquisition going, because we love it. Thank you.
Those were such oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just trying to save on time here, but those were such fabulous comments. I think to close for me, I completely agree. When we're designing for mushroom packaging solutions for clients, we really look to introduce as little packaging as possible. Ultimately, we look to talk to clients about what their desires are for the presentation and an unboxing experience for a client, but also to deliver a high performance protective packaging solution, which is fully sustainable and fully home compostable. So there's fabulous sustainable packaging solutions on the market. They do, of course, require different questions, like, will my packaging grow a mushroom? That you probably would have never thought to ask that before, but ask those questions, because ultimately we can address those and we can support you with a high performance solution that really makes a difference and is a soil amendment at the end of the day. You can find us at mushroompackaging.com, at ecovative.com. We also, when I held up our bag of grow it yourself materials here before, we have a grow it yourself business. It's called grow.bio, where you can buy a kit of our raw materials and grow your own products. So it's a great way to come to us with questions. We actually have a lot of clients who come to us ready for a first call, and I'm starting to go through the conversation about what mushroom packaging is. And you're like, nope, I know it all. I already grew my own prototype. I'm just ready to scale with you, which is really exciting. And I love starting there with clients. So it's a good way to get your hands on our raw material and try it yourself.
Wow, so awesome. I want one. Okay. Thank you, ladies, so much. Thank you all for joining us and sharing your amazing wisdom, expertise, and thanks for all the incredible questions. We hope that more of them got answered than we've checked off in the Q&A. And we're just so grateful for you guys to share your time, your expertise with our global audience. I think this is a testament to how much interest there is and how much support there is. And I see more of this in all of our futures. Please sign up for our next webinar in September. It will be September 14th. It's back on a Wednesday and a little earlier, so 1:30 Pacific, 4:30 Eastern US time. And it's going to be, it's titled Crafting Hollywood Storylines That Flip the Script on Plastics. And it's featuring Kate Folb, who's the director of Hollywood Health and Society at USC, and Emily Gallagher and Austin Elson of Fishtown Films. They're the creative team behind the first ever zero waste feature film called Citywide. And the amazing Scott Z. Burns, one of the producers of An Inconvenient Truth and the screenwriter behind Contagion and Apple TV's upcoming Extrapolation. So this is going to be a discussion on tips and tools to help storytellers and especially script writers seamlessly craft plastic-free and plastic-aware worlds in the creative community. So sign up now. We hope to see you then. And please get involved. If you're not already a member of Plastic Pollution Coalition, it is free to join. You can join as an individual, an organization, a business. You can sign up at that link or find from our website, support us, support our work. We are entirely funded by donations. And these webinars that we provide for free are supported that way. And then connect with us on social media. Here are all of our handles if you're not already following us. And you can also just sign up to get our newsletter, et cetera. So we will be sending out a follow-up survey and appreciate your feedback to help us improve these. We started doing these with the pandemic and they've grown and grown. And we're super excited to continue to improve and send us recommendations for how we can do that and topics, etc. And thank you all again for joining us. And thanks to our Plastic Pollution Coalition member groups and organizations and businesses and all our staff and the team behind the scenes making this happen, and sharing the links. And thank you so much for being with us today. Look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.